From an entrepreneur calling the Sharks worthless, to Draymond having to file a restraining order against Bubba Q's boneless baby back ribs, here are some of Shark Tank's craziest contestants. Now, whenever an entrepreneur steps into the tank, the one thing they don't want to do is piss off the sharks. But the owner of Scotavest seemed to have missed the memo. Scott Jordan appeared on the show during Season 3, looking to snag a $500,000 investment for a 15% slice of his gadget-storing attire company. As Scott proudly talked about his impressive $5 million in sales, Kevin couldn't resist the bait. He smelled money in the water and made his move. And since no one else seemed that interested, everyone expected Scott to take the deal. But he decided to press the pause button and called for a timeout so he could have a quick chat with his advisor, who just so happened to be the man who designed Apple's original computer, Steve Wozniak. When Scott returned to the tank, something was off. Turns out, Steve told him that the sharks were lowballing him for a vest, whose only selling point was the fact that it could store gadgets. Anyway, Scott got all feisty and started stirring up trouble on purpose. The tension just kept escalating, and before you knew it, a full-blown argument had erupted. That's when Scott unleashed the ultimate power move. Using the Sharks' signature catchphrase against them, he yelled, "You're out!" which I have to admit was pretty funny. And the Sharks might have let that slide, if he didn't do what he did next. See, right after this, Scott took things up a notch and called all the Sharks worthless before storming off set. But if you think what Scott said was out of his pocket, wait till you hear about how the owner of Pavlok acted in front of the Sharks. Manish Sethi stepped into the tank seeking a $500,000 investment for a 3.14% stake in his company, Pavlok, that made these little wristbands that were designed to shock you out of your bad habits. And take the shock part very literally here, because Manish actually wanted to electrocute his customers every time they did something naughty. Mark Cuban sniffed the BS from a mile away and called Manish out as a con artist. Apparently, he didn't have any clinical trials to back up his claims. All he had were a bunch of testimonials and some Pavlovian conditioning mumbo-jumbo. The other Sharks followed suit and bailed on the deal, leaving only Kevin O'Leary in the game. Surprisingly, he tossed Manish a lifeline, a sweet $500,000 loan with a 7.5% interest rate for 24 months. Not a bad offer, considering the skepticism swirling around. But here's where things took a hilarious turn. Manish rejected Kevin's offer, but not because of the terms. Oh no, it was all about O'Leary's on-screen persona. You know, how he's portrayed as a greedy, mean-spirited shark who loves to crush everyone's dreams. Anyways, Manish boldly claimed, "Anyone but Mr. Wonderful, please." And Kevin wasn't having any of that. He unleashed a storm of expletives only a sailor would know and told Manish to hit the road. Now, this wasn't the only time an entrepreneur pitched a ridiculous product with so much confidence. Remember sticky notes, lady? Mary Ellen Simonson strolled into the Shark Tank with a crazy ask: $100,000 for a 20% stake in her company, attached notes. Her big idea? A fancy retractable board to slap on the side of your laptop where you can stick your beloved Post-it notes. According to Mary Ellen, it was the perfect solution for those who have their lives plastered with sticky squares. Robert Herjavec couldn't contain his disbelief and straight up asked her if she was out of her mind. And guess what? She had the audacity to respond with a resounding yes. To add insult to injury, Simonson hadn't even made a single sale. I mean, who in their right mind would shell out their hard-earned cash for a retractable board when e-notes were taking the digital world by storm? It's safe to say the Sharks were not impressed with Mary, or her idea. But then, there's people like Jared Joyce who have businesses, but their personality is just insufferable. Jared started off simple, demonstrating how his pre-made furniture pieces easily snapped together like a puzzle impressive, right? Well, Jared thought so too, and he was seeking $250,000 for a 25% stake in his company, valuing it at a cool $1 million. But things took a very drastic turn from here. See, after the demo, Jared proudly boasted that he had a lot more inventions up his sleeve. The Sharks were intrigued, and Damon asked if those other inventions were part of the deal. And then it happened. He compared the investment to getting married and suggested the Sharks buy him a drink first. Damon wasn't having it and called Jared a slick Willy. As the grilling continued, the sharks uncovered the truth. Jared had been at this game for a whopping 7 years, yet he hadn't made a dime for his investors. Lori and Kevin swooped in with an offer to buy Jared out for $250,000 and take full control of his company. But he had other plans. He insisted on a partnership and even threw in the idea of royalties. Well, let's just say Lori and Kevin weren't exactly thrilled with that proposition. They wanted full ownership, no strings attached, especially to Jared. In the end, Jared walked away empty-handed, but not before being called a slime ball by Daymond John. Ouch! James Martin struck a similar nerve with the Sharks when he pitched his product, Copa Divino. I mean, James was the epitome of self-absorption, arrogance, and stubbornness. He came into the tank with a hefty ask, $600,000 for a measly 20% of his winery Copa Divino. But here's the thing. The wine industry was already super competitive at the time. The real money, according to the Sharks, lay in the packaging and licensing game. And guess who perked up at the mention of licensing? You got it, Kevin. O'Leary saw an opportunity to leverage his own wine brand and connections in the industry. He made an offer of $600,000, but with a catch. He wanted a controlling stake of 51%. Now that could have been a sweet deal for James. He could have used the cash to expand his business and still retained full control of his winery, while reaping the benefits of Kevin's licensing prowess. O'Leary could have brought in a cool $1 million in licensing deals in the first year alone. James would have been swimming in money like a tipsy shark at happy hour, but he missed the boat and passed on the deal. But James wasn't done yet. He had the audacity to come back for a second round in the tank. This time, he demanded a jaw-dropping $1.2 million for 30% of his company. The Sharks, Mark, Kevin, and Robert weren't having any of it. They were only willing to offer him half of that value. It was clear to everyone that James wasn't there for a deal. He just wanted more free publicity and a chance to flaunt his success in front of the Sharks. Throughout the negotiations, James had this smug look on his face and spent more time sipping his wine than actively participating. He thought he was doing the Sharks a favor by giving them another shot at his company. But let's be real, he was still the same old arrogant James Martin from his first disastrous Shark Tank appearance. In the end, it was déjà vu all over again. No deal for James, and the Sharks despised him even more. Still, at least he doesn't have Daymond John filing restraining orders against him. In Season 5, the Baker family wowed Daymond with their boneless baby back rib company, Bubba's Q. A deal was struck, and John invested $300,000 for a 30% stake in the business. The trouble started when the Baker family claimed that off-camera, John had a change of heart and altered the deal to $100,000 for 35% of the company. Al Bubba Baker, his wife Sabrina, and their daughter Brittany also accused John of excluding them from crucial business meetings and blocking potentially lucrative partnerships. They even claimed that they'd only seen 4% of the $16 million in revenue the company generated since appearing on the show. Of course, John had a different side of the story. He fired back on social media and in the LA Times, blaming the pandemic and supply chain issues for the business's struggles. He argued that he couldn't fully promote the product and that the bottom line took a hit due to price increases. John also decided to take legal action. He filed a restraining order against all 3 members of the Baker family, claiming they had violated the terms of their business partnership. Talk about throwing down the gauntlet. A spokesperson for John stated the restraining order was a result of the Bakers' actions undermining the partnership and their total disregard for the agreed-upon legal parameters. The spokesperson made it clear that John won't tolerate attempts to undo past business decisions through slanderous social media posts and articles. But who knows what goes on behind the scenes in the crazy world of Shark Tank? So, from Draymond having to file a restraining order against Bubba Q's boneless baby back ribs, to an entrepreneur calling the Sharks worthless, these were some of Shark Tank's craziest contestants.